everyone, my name is Justine Leslie. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am an intuitive, and what I do is I help awakened sensitive souls navigate this crazy world. And actually today, it seems very fitting because today I'm talking about three quirky or weird or sometimes unbelievable or shocking or I don't know how else to say it, but out of the ordinary things that could happen to you while you're going through a spiritual awakening. Now, my spiritual awakening was actually about 6 years ago now, in 2013. It's 2020, and mine was very intense. So a couple of things I want to add before I kind of go into these three different things, and I wonder if they resonate with you guys, and if they do, please put it in the comments. Is that mine came really intensely. And what I mean by that is that I was not, I don't think anybody's really prepared, although I have read that a lot of people try to awaken their kundalini during yoga, breath exercises, that kind of thing, which I couldn't believe that people actually do that when I was reading about that, because it was so intense and so frightening and so pretty much terrifying for myself when I didn't really understand what was happening. And I think that's part of why it's terrifying, right? Is because we really don't know what's happening to us. I know a lot of people question their sanity at this time, as I have done many times over my spiritual awakening. And I also had a kundalini experience with that, lasted about 5.5 years. And you know, there were definitely days, more often than not, where I did question my sanity. And if I'm being completely candid, it was almost every day. So with that being said, I believe that why I'm putting this label of quirky or unbelievable is because it felt like that at the time. And it definitely can make you feel crazy. And my whole thing is to make sure other people don't feel that way, right? Because this is actually more normal than not. And why I say that is because I believe as a collective consciousness, we're all waking up. More and more people are waking up, especially those that are empathic, right? So people that are empathic, if you don't know what that means, is that we just absorb energy more deeply than a typical person. Biologically, we have more sensitive central nervous systems, as well as hyperactive neurons in our brain. Now, right? So I discovered that when I went through my spiritual awakenings. Okay, so I'm going a little bit off topic, but I wanted to kind of give you guys that background. So definitely horrifying, definitely intense, but I do notice that people do go through spiritual awakenings, sometimes without the kundalini experience, which is that energy that surges through our body and through our chakra system and really jolts us up and really jolts us open. Right. And so basically it's a giant purge, but I'll do another video on that another day. But basically what happens is that you know, it's just it could happen gradually, right? Like not as intense. But for those that are going through something super intense, I mean, this video was for everybody, no matter the intensity level or whatnot. If you're slowly waking up, that's cool. If you're suddenly waking up, I'm here for you. Let me pray for you. So let me jump into it, because the video is about these three quirky or unbelievable or, you know, I'm actually not going to label it crazy. We're going to kind of put that aside for now. So I'm going to just begin. Okay. So number one is, this is going to sound odd, so please stay with me. The death of the ego. That's actually the number one thing that really kind of happens with a spiritual awakening and a kundalini experience. So what do I mean by death of the ego? So basically, death of the ego means that, well, first let's do the concept of who we are as souls. So we are, you know, my name is Justine Leslie, but that's who I am as a human, right? So what I mean by that is that is my persona, that is my human self, and that is who I have reincarnated into for this lifetime, right? So if we think about it that way, and we can see Justine as the, if we are witnessing Justine, right? You guys are witnessing Justine, but something within myself is witnessing her as well. That is actually the soul. So in philosophy, they usually call it the witness, right? Because you're witnessing something. You know that something is happening. You're seeing something from the inside out, and you're observing. So it's almost like you have these dualities within you. So you have two. I want to say one is a persona, and then one is actually the higher self, right? That's what the soul is. So it's interchangeable. So higher self and the soul. So basically, a spiritual awakening is getting in touch with the higher self. So when we do that, we actually kill off the ego, right? Because it becomes an extreme. And that's actually part of the reason why it's super intense, is because we really, really feel connected to our soul. Now, how could this be a bad thing or a negative thing? So many different ways. So when I went through my awakening, when it was the death of the ego, first of all, everybody thought I went nuts, right? Everybody's like, what happened to Justine? And it was almost like they had to also mourn the death of her, which I totally understand. Guys, so when we're going through, this is a little bit of a side note, but when we're going through a spiritual awakening and other people are uncomfortable about it, I know it's really, really hard in the moment to not take it personally, but they're actually experiencing the death of you as well. So you have to understand that we're all experiencing a mourning period. That is something that I learned years later, but I thought would be helpful if you're going through it now. So they are mourning the death of you because you are mourning the death of who you thought you were, which is super scary because when you don't know who you are, and all of a sudden the higher self is present and you haven't even, at least in my case, I was all ego driven beforehand. I was in a job I hated. I didn't know what my passions or purposes were. I was in an abusive relationship. I had friends around me that didn't really care about me. I had no relationship with my family. Literally everything is misaligned for me, and nothing was really soul aligned and aligned with who I am as a person, soul wise. So that's why I actually believe it happened to me, right? I was actually also triggered by a couple of traumas, which could do it, as well as, like I said, people actively tried to activate their Kundalini. I've also heard of childbirth doing this. Having a spiritual awakening, a near-death experience is another popular one. Common one, but all different reasons. But this isn't about the reasons. This is about what actually happens. So basically, you lose your personality is basically what I'm saying, and you try so hard to keep it up and keep up appearances because something is happening to you, and you can't really explain it to other people that aren't experiencing it. So you kind of just get really quiet, and you tend to isolate yourself. At least that's what happened with me, and it's actually very normal because again, you are also mourning the person that you used to be. It was really sad. It really felt like a true death of who I used to be. And now when I look back, obviously I don't resonate with that person at all. She died, in my opinion, but you emerge as a new person, the butterfly metaphor, right? You get into the cocoon and then you come out the butterfly. But yeah, so basically it's super hard and super difficult because your personality goes with the ego, right? Because your personality is a... people say personality is an expansion of your soul, but I don't necessarily believe that. I believe it's both soul and ego mixed in there, right? Because we need to have an ego in our personality to actually survive on the human planet, right? And that's actually why we have an ego, guys. So that's why it's not necessarily a really great thing where people are like, oh, I wish I could put my ego aside. But do you? Do you? It's actually healthy to have a healthy ego because that's how we actually survive on this human planet as human beings, right? We need one. So not having one and being here was extremely difficult. It was extremely painful. It was extremely confusing, and I just did not fit in anywhere. It was so awkward, and I didn't want to be here. And not in a way that I was suicidal or anything, but I just really, wanting to be alone a lot, which is totally normal. And guys, a lot of people go through this. So if you need to isolate, go ahead and isolate. You don't owe anybody an explanation, okay? So yeah, it's very confusing. The ego comes back slowly but surely. But again, like I said, my awakening lasted about 5.5 years. So the ego started coming back probably around 3 or so. Do you guys hear the ambulance? I'm in New York. Sorry about that. But yeah, it came back about like 3 years ago or so. I would say maybe like halfway through. So it doesn't last super, super long. But I have to say, it's like you are all light and love all the time. And it's almost like your shadow self is not even there. Your ego is not there at all. It's not present. But it really gives you a lot of insights to who you are as a person. So, and one thing I should definitely mention here is you will really come out of it knowing yourself very, very well. And when I say yourself, I mean your higher self, right? So I really, really understand the kind of person that I am, the kind of soul that I am, and it's really easy for me to, that comes in handy when it comes to job opportunities, relationships, what you can and can't handle, or what would fill your soul and fill your cup, and that kind of thing. So it was super beneficial and super worth it. Just very strange, and it's almost hard to put it into words. I'm struggling a bit, but really it's about the death of the ego, including the death of the personality. If you resonate, please comment. Okay, so let's move on to the second thing. So the second thing is heightened psychic abilities. This was one of the other things that was super, super scary to me. So I am clairsentient and I am claircognizant dominant, which means clear seeing and clear feeling. And you've probably heard of the most common one, clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. I have a little bit of that. And then clairaudient is the other popular one. And then there's a ton of others, right? And that one is clear hearing. So I discovered that I have claircognizant, clairsentience, and it heightened like crazy. I was seeing things. I was experiencing things. I was having people visit me. I had my first mediumship experience. I guess it was 3 years ago or so. It was frightening. So a lot of this stuff that happens to you out of the blue. And guys, maybe I should preface this by saying I was actually very atheist before all of this happened to me. So it's very, very strange. But it's always been there. That's the other thing too. It's not that you get psychic gifts, it's that they heighten. And just to add too, we all have psychic gifts, right? Especially people that are empathic, we have these gifts for sure. So that heightened. It was very frightening. I had experiences with shadow people, which are, I saw a lot of shadows. I felt a lot of presences around me and that kind of thing, to the point where I was very, very terrified. A lot of spirits came to communicate with me in the in-between is what I call it. Some people call it lucid dreaming, but basically I was in between sleeping and awake, and I would get requests from spirits all of the time. And it was very, very interesting. Interesting is a downplay on it because I was pretty much very frightened. So that is definitely something quirky, something strange, something, a little bit out of the ordinary, but go with it, right? Nowadays, as I read cards and things like that, obviously my clairsentient, claircognizant, clairvoyance come in handy with that, but it's definitely a very much toned down version of it, which means that I'm not experiencing the intensity of it, but I have trained myself enough intuitively to figure out when I'm getting those messages, if that makes sense to you guys. So it's definitely a very much toned down version, but I'm very grateful for it, right? So I can actually not freak out, right? Where I can actually read in front of you guys and actually interpret and intuit information. So that's the second thing. So the third thing that I found amongst the many, but I really honed in on these three, is the purging of false beliefs and unhealed trauma. And it's actually not particularly pertaining to this life. I also mean past lives. So when people come to me and they ask me what spirituality actually means, I say it's everybody's particular experience, right? We can't actually give it a definition. But if I had to give it a definition, I would definitely call it the unlearning of everything you thought to be true. So basically, it's the stripping down of everything that you believed was actually true. So it's really about finding the truth. The truth of pretty much everything. What you were taught as a kid, what we believe as a society, how we perceive ourselves, everything in everything and anything that that can be unlearned. So it's not actually a lot of learning, it's a lot of unlearning. So it's actually a little bit backwards, but we really, really get to the heart of the truth. So it could be mind-boggling and it could be disheartening, right? It could be why can't I say the word? A realization of the truth that you have been abused, or you do have unhealed trauma. You do have resentments and regrets about your family and things like that, and just so many different things. And again, on top of that is stuff from past lives. So there's a ton of stuff that needs to be healed. And it's just like a giant, I believe life in general is a giant healing, but during this time, it's magnified like crazy. Your full-time job is healing. The whole time is healing. And it's just, it's like a nightmare. It's like a nightmare. I actually joke and I say, the reason why I'm laughing now is because the first 2 years of my awakening, I didn't laugh at all. I didn't think anything was funny, mostly because humor lies in our personality, right? Like I said, for the number one, I lost my personality. It was gone. I was trying to keep up with appearances and try to, try to, I don't want to say authentic, because my authentic self was my higher self, but I was like trying to not make people uncomfortable, basically. So for those first 2 years, I felt like I didn't laugh at all. I was really going through it. I was also, to be fair, at the same time, I was also healing from the trauma that triggered the spiritual awakening. So it was extra not funny, right? So it was all of this healing all at one time, and it was awful. But also at the same time, very therapeutic, but also very, how do I say this? Euphoric. That's the only other word I can use. Euphoric. Mostly because you're finding out the truth of God and universe, source, however you want to say it, divine energy. So you get really, really connected, which is the most beautiful thing. But again, at the same time, a lot of people report that they have depression. I did not during my spiritual awakening, but a lot of people, it's very common that they go through a period of euphoria, depression, and they're just kind of going back and forth. And mostly because of the really high highs, and there are a lot of high highs and a lot of low lows, because when we're also unlearning, we're letting go of what doesn't serve us anymore, because we're figuring stuff out. Like, for example, I had to unlearn that the people that were around me didn't really care about me, and they were not authentic, and they were not genuine friends. And it was sad, because it was like I had to start over, and I had to let go. And I say this a lot. If you guys see me live on Facebook Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, I often say that letting go is the hardest thing that we could ever do as human beings, because it's just not very natural to us. It's natural to our soul to be detached, but it's not very natural for human beings to do so. And it's one of the hardest things that you'll ever have to do, is letting go of what doesn't serve you anymore, especially if it feels familiar, especially if you feel like if it's a person that they've been there for you for a lot of different things, but it's just they're not coming with you to your up level, right? Because what is a spiritual awakening? It's an up level. It's an unlearning. It's an up level, but you're going in a different direction. You woke up, and they're not, and it's tough. And it kind of makes me want to cry now, because it's just really, because especially if it's intense, right? You don't get to shed everything. If you're having your spiritual awakening, it's a little bit gradual. Things happen in chronological order. When it's intense, like something that I had, it was really letting go of a lot of things at one time. Thankfully, the universe let me have a couple of things, including eating meat and drinking. But I also, I also got, this might be like the fourth, right? Odd thing or unique thing or quirky thing, but I got a premonition that I will let go of meat and alcohol eventually. And I went kicking and screaming, but I'm off alcohol and I'm off meat. I don't eat meat, but it happened. It didn't happen right away, but it eventually did happen. But and like I said, thankfully I got to hold on to something as my whole life was turning completely upside down. So it's hard. It's hard. Healing is so hard, and it takes a long time. So that's the other thing too that I want to kind of close with, is that Mine did last for about 5.5 years. Throughout your life, I feel like you definitely have a lot of consciousness shifts. You do have little mini awakenings here and there, but really your massive spiritual awakening sometimes happens for us during our Saturn returns, which our first one is around 27 to age 29. We start to wake up a little bit. Mine was at 26 going on 27. And it's like the single most, like I look at my life as like before that and after that. Like I can't even recognize myself before that. And there's no way in hell I would ever go back there. And that's the other thing too, guys, when we're letting go, here's a tip. I know it seems terrible in the moment. So I feel for you. Again, letting go is super, super hard. Detaching is super hard, but you're not going to want to look back. I promise you, because it's pushing you in a direction that's very, very aligned with who you are at a soul level, right? So you're not going to want to look back. It's going to seem like you're going to want to, but you really don't. And it's time for a change, clearly, because this is what's happening to you, right? It's just a giant unlearning and a giant healing at the same time. So, okay, guys. I just want to say again, I probably said it like 1,000 times in this video already. My heart out to you if you are going through an awakening of some kind. Please put in the comments if any of these resonate with you. Please tell me about your experiences. But over the years, I have connected with like-minded people who have experienced this thing because, by the way, it's something that is good to do so you don't feel as cuckoo or crazy as you're going through it, is finding people that are going through it as well, or people that have, like myself. Please follow my channel. But hopefully this is a little bit easier on you guys during this time. So light and love to everybody going through it, and I will definitely be posting more about this stuff. So please, again, subscribe to my channel, and if any of this resonates, please put some stuff in the comments. So thanks, guys, and until next time, see you then.